The winding road was quiet under the moonlit sky. Jake, a mechanic in his early 30s, was driving back home after a long day. His old pickup truck hummed steadily as he navigated the empty highway, the sound of tires on asphalt the only companion to his thoughts. He was looking forward to a warm shower and sleep, nothing more. Suddenly, a faint rustling sound came from the back of the truck. At first, Jake thought it was his imagination, but then it came again, louder this time. Frowning, he glanced in the rearview mirror but saw nothing unusual. Probably just the wind or some loose tools, he muttered to himself. But as the noise persisted, Jake's curiosity grew. He pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, switched off the engine, and grabbed a flashlight from the glove box. Stepping out into the chilly night, he walked toward the back of the truck. "All right, let's see what's causing all this racket," he said aloud, trying to sound confident, though unease had begun to creep into his chest. He opened the truck bed and shined the flashlight inside. At first, he saw nothing but a couple of old tarps and boxes. Then the beam of light landed on something, or rather someone. Huddled in the corner was a figure, cloaked in a strange, shimmering fabric. Jake froze, his breath catching in his throat. The figure looked up, and he saw a face unlike anything he'd ever seen. Her skin was a deep blue, marked with faint silver patterns that seemed to glow faintly under the flashlight. Her eyes, larger than human eyes, were a brilliant gold, filled with fear. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. Don't give me away." Jake stared, unable to process what he was seeing. Was this some kind of prank? A movie stunt? But the desperation in her voice and the blood staining her arm told him otherwise. Who are you?" he finally managed to ask. "No time," she said, glancing nervously toward the road. "They're coming. Please, I need your help." Jake's instincts screamed at him to run, to get as far away from this bizarre situation as possible. But something about her vulnerability struck a chord in him. She wasn't just strange, she was scared. "Who's coming?" he asked, his voice steadier than he felt. "The hunters," she said, gripping her injured arm. "They'll kill us both if they find me." Jake's heart pounded. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew one thing. Leaving her here wasn't an option. "All right," he said, climbing back into the driver's seat. "Stay down and stay quiet." As the truck roared to life and sped back onto the road, Jake couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror. He had no idea who or what he had just let into his life. But one thing was clear. The night was far from over. The truck's engine roared as Jake pressed the pedal harder, trying to put as much distance as possible between them and whatever danger was chasing the strange woman in his truck. The quiet road that once felt so familiar now seemed like a tunnel of uncertainty, every shadow along the roadside feeling alive with menace. "Who are these hunters?" Jake asked, his voice sharp as he glanced at the rearview mirror. Kaylin, the blue-skinned woman, was crouched low, her golden eyes darting nervously to the rear window. "They are bounty hunters from my world. They won't stop until they catch me, or kill me." "Your world?" Jake asked incredulously. "Are you telling me you're an alien?" Kaylin gave him a grim look, as if his question wasn't worth answering. "Focus on driving. If they find us, we won't have time for explanations." Jake gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white. He couldn't believe what was happening. Less than an hour ago, he was a regular guy just trying to get home. And now he was caught up in some intergalactic manhunt. Suddenly, a bright flash of light illuminated the road behind them. Jake glanced in the mirror and saw a sleek, metallic vehicle hovering several feet above the ground, moving fast toward them. Its smooth surface reflected the moonlight, and strange blue beams of energy pulsed from its sides. "They're here," Kaylin hissed, sitting upright. Her hands glowed faintly, as if preparing for something. "What do we do?" "My truck can't outrun that thing," Jake shouted. Kaylin leaned forward, her voice urgent. Take the dirt road ahead. Their vehicle isn't built for rough terrain. Jake spotted the narrow dirt path she mentioned and yanked the steering wheel. The truck lurched as it veered off the main road, the tires kicking up a cloud of dust. The hover vehicle followed, its blue beams scanning the area like spotlights. "Hang on," Jake yelled as the truck bounced violently over the uneven ground. Kaylin braced herself, her eyes fixed on the pursuing craft. She reached into her cloak and pulled out a small cylindrical device. It was no bigger than a pen, but when she pressed a button, it emitted a low hum and a faint rippling distortion in the air. "What's that?" Jake asked, his voice filled with both curiosity and panic. "An EMP disruptor," she replied. "It won't destroy their craft, but it'll buy us some time." She leaned out of the window, her cloak billowing behind her, and aimed the device at the hovercraft. With a sharp click, a pulse of energy shot out. The pursuing vehicle shuddered and began to wobble, its lights flickering before it veered off course and crashed into the ground with a metallic screech. Kaylin collapsed back into her seat, breathing heavily. "That won't stop them for long," she said. "We need to keep moving." Jake swallowed hard, adrenaline pumping through his veins. "You're full of surprises, lady. And you've got courage," Kaylin said softly, glancing at him with a faint smile. "We'll need both if we're going to survive." The truck sped deeper into the darkness, the night now alive with danger and the beginning of an unlikely alliance. The truck roared down the dirt path, its tires crunching over gravel and kicking up clouds of dust. Jake's grip on the steering wheel was firm, his knuckles white from the tension. The adrenaline was still coursing through his veins, but his mind raced even faster than the truck. Who was this alien woman? And what kind of mess had he just thrown himself into? Kaylin sat in the passenger seat, her golden eyes scanning the darkness behind them. She hadn't spoken since she used that strange device to disable their pursuers. The silence in the truck was heavy, broken only by the rumble of the engine and the occasional creak of the suspension. Finally, Jake couldn't take it anymore. "All right, I need answers," he said, his voice sharp but controlled. "Who are you? Why are those guys after you? And what in the world just happened back there?" Kaylin hesitated for a moment, then let out a sigh. "My name is Callan. I come from a planet called Vorinth. Those hunters you saw work for the Syndicate, a powerful organization that controls most of the known galaxy. She paused, as if deciding how much to tell him. "I was part of a rebellion against them." Jake blinked, glancing at her briefly before turning his attention back to the road. "A rebellion? Like a resistance or something?" Kaylin nodded. "Yes. The Syndicate enslaves weaker species, exploits planets, and silences anyone who dares to oppose them. My people fought back, but we were betrayed from within. I barely escaped with my life, and with something they desperately want back." "What's that?" Jake asked, his curiosity piqued. Kaylin hesitated again, her gaze dropping to her lap. "It's not something I can give them. It's embedded in me, my biometrics. A code. It contains information about the Syndicate's operations, their weaknesses. If I can get it to the right people, we could end their reign." Jake let out a low whistle. "So you're like some kind of galactic whistleblower, and they'll do anything to shut you up." Kaylin nodded grimly. "Exactly. And now you're involved." Jake frowned. "Great. Just what I needed. A bunch of space thugs chasing me." Kaylin looked at him, her expression softening. "I didn't ask for your help, human. You could have left me back there." Jake snorted. "Yeah, and what kind of person would that make me? You were bleeding and scared. I couldn't just walk away." Kaylin studied him for a moment, as if trying to understand his motives. "You're kind. Humans. You're more compassionate than I expected." Jake shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just crazy." The tension eased slightly, replaced by a cautious understanding between the two. For now, they were allies, whether they liked it or not. As the truck rumbled on through the night, Kaylin glanced out the window, her voice barely a whisper. I hope your compassion doesn't get us both killed. Jake didn't respond, but deep down, he was thinking the same thing. The dusty road stretched endlessly ahead, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling they weren't alone anymore. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror every few seconds, searching for the faint glow of the alien pursuers. Beside him, Kaylin adjusted the strange metallic device she had used earlier, her expression tense and focused. We're not safe yet, she muttered, her golden eyes scanning the dark forest that lined the road. Jake let out a humorless laugh. Yeah, I kinda figured that when they showed up in a flying death machine. Before Kaylin could respond, the truck suddenly jerked as something slammed into its rear. Jake cursed, gripping the wheel to steady the vehicle. They're here, Kaylin shouted, pointing to the side mirror. Jake glanced back and saw another hovercraft, sleek and menacing, closing in on them. Its glowing blue beams swept across the road, lighting up the truck like a target. Hang on, Jake yelled as he swerved sharply onto a narrow trail leading into the woods. The truck bounced violently over rocks and roots, and Jake's heart raced as the hovercraft followed effortlessly, gliding above the uneven ground. They're faster than us, Kaylin said, her voice tight with urgency. Jake grit his teeth. Yeah, no kidding. Any more tricks up your sleeve? Kaylin hesitated, then reached into her cloak and pulled out a small sphere that pulsed faintly with light. This is a shock pulse grenade. It'll disable their craft, but it only works at close range. Jake's eyes widened. Close range? Are you kidding me? Do you have a better idea? She snapped. He didn't. The truck burst through a clearing, the hovercraft right on their tail. Jake slammed the brakes, and the truck skidded to a halt. What are you doing? Kaylin demanded. Giving you close range, Jake said grimly. Before Kaylin could argue, the hovercraft loomed overhead, its sleek body glowing ominously. The air hummed with energy as the craft prepared to fire. Now or never, Jake shouted. Kaylin threw open the door, leaped onto the truck bed, and hurled the grenade toward the craft. The sphere pulsed brightly before exploding in a burst of electrical energy. The hovercraft sputtered, its lights flickering as it veered off course, and crashed into the forest with a deafening crash. Smoke and sparks rose from the wreckage, and for a moment the night was eerily quiet again. Kaylin climbed back into the truck, breathing heavily. That won't be the last of them. Jake started the engine, his hands trembling slightly. Yeah, I figured. But at least we bought ourselves a little time. As they drove deeper into the woods, Kaylin glanced at him, her expression unreadable. You're braver than I thought, human. Most would have left me to fend for myself. Jake shrugged, trying to hide his nervousness. Guess I'm not most people. Kaylin's lips curved into a faint smile. No, you're not. The forest seemed endless, its dark canopy swallowing the dim light of the moon. Jake gripped the wheel tightly, guiding the truck over the uneven terrain as Kaylin kept a vigilant watch out the window. The faint smell of smoke lingered in the air, a reminder of the downed hovercraft they had narrowly escaped. We can't keep doing this, Jake muttered, his voice breaking the heavy silence. Kaylin turned to him, her golden eyes sharp. Do you have a plan, or do you just intend to complain until they catch us? Jake shot her a look. I'm not the one with an intergalactic target on my back. Kaylin's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. Fair point. But if you want to survive this, you'll need to stop thinking like a mechanic and start thinking like a soldier. Jake frowned. I was a mechanic in the army. Fixed vehicles, patched things up. Nothing fancy. I'm no soldier. Kaylin tilted her head, studying him. You've got instincts. Quick reflexes. You didn't hesitate back there when I needed you. That's more than most soldiers. Jake sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. Yeah, well, instincts don't last forever. We need somewhere safe to regroup. Kaylin nodded, her gaze shifting back to the window. Do you know anyone who can help? someone you trust. Jake hesitated. Trust was a rare thing in his life. But there was one person who might help. Sam, an old friend, and a tech genius who lived completely off the grid. If anyone could handle this kind of situation, it was Sam. I know a guy, Jake said finally. He's good with tech. If anyone can hide us and figure out a plan, it's him. Then let's go, Kalen said firmly. Jake adjusted their course, heading for the backroads that would lead them to Sam's remote hideout. The truck jostled and creaked as they navigated the rough terrain, the forest slowly giving way to open fields. After a long stretch of silence, Kalen spoke again, her voice softer this time. Why are you helping me, Jake? You could have walked away. This isn't your fight. Jake glanced at her, his grip on the wheel tightening. I don't know. Maybe it's because you looked scared, or maybe it's because I've seen enough people get left behind in my life. Kalen seemed to consider his words, her expression unreadable. Compassion can be a strength, but it's also a weakness. Don't let it get you killed. Jake smirked, a flicker of humor breaking through his exhaustion. Thanks for the advice, warrior princess. Kalen's eyes narrowed, but there was a hint of amusement in her tone. Just drive, human. As the truck sped on toward the horizon, Jake couldn't help but feel a strange sense of purpose. He didn't fully understand what he had gotten himself into, but one thing was clear. He wasn't turning back now. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a faint orange glow over the horizon as Jake's truck pulled into a secluded property surrounded by tall trees and crumbling fences. The place looked like it had been abandoned for years, but Jake knew better. This was Sam's hideout, a haven for all things unconventional and off the grid. Kalen glanced around, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. Your friend lives here. Jake smirked. He doesn't just live here. He's probably watching us through half a dozen cameras right now. As if on cue, a loudspeaker crackled to life. Jake, is that you? And what's with the extraterrestrial hitchhiker? Kalen tensed, her hand hovering near her cloak, but Jake raised a calming hand. Relax. That's Sam. He's harmless. Mostly. The gates creaked open, and Jake drove the truck inside, parking near a ramshackle workshop covered in antennas and wires. A wiry man in his 40s stepped out, his thick glasses glinting in the morning light. Jake, you've got some explaining to do, Sam said, crossing his arms. His gaze shifted to Kalen, and his brows raised. And I'm guessing it's a good story. It's a long one, Jake replied as he climbed out of the truck. But first, we need help. We're in trouble, Sam. Big trouble. Sam sighed but gestured for them to follow. All right, come inside. Let's see what we're dealing with. Inside the workshop, the air was filled with the hum of machinery and the faint smell of oil and solder. Kalen stood back, observing quietly as Jake explained the events of the past night. When he finished, Sam whistled low. So let me get this straight, Sam said, leaning against a cluttered workbench. She's a rebel fugitive from some galactic empire, and you've decided to play hero. Pretty much, Jake said with a shrug. Sam turned to Kalen. And you've got some high-value intel stuck in your, what, DNA? Biometrics, Kalen corrected. It's encrypted within me. The Syndicate wants it back, but if I can get it to my people, it could end their control over the galaxy. Sam rubbed his chin, intrigued. Well, that's one hell of a data drive. And you've got bounty hunters after you. Kalen nodded. They'll stop at nothing to find me. Sam grinned. Then it's a good thing you came to me. I can boost the truck's defenses, scramble your signatures, and maybe even hack some of their tech if we get our hands on it. Jake exhaled in relief. Thanks, Sam. I knew I could count on you. Sam glanced at Kalen again. Don't thank me yet. If they track you here, we're all in for a world of hurt. Kalen stepped forward, her voice firm. If that happens, I'll fight. I won't let anyone else pay the price for my war. Sam gave her a wry smile. Well, you're definitely not boring. Let's get to work. As the team began preparing for the next step, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that things were only going to get more dangerous. But for the first time in years, he felt alive. The workshop buzzed with activity as Sam worked his magic. Tools clanked, wires sparked, and screens flickered with alien code that Callan had reluctantly shared. Jake paced nervously, stealing glances at Callan, who stood near the edge of the room, her arms crossed and her golden eyes focused on the glowing monitors. "So what's the plan, genius?" Jake asked, breaking the silence. Sam adjusted his glasses, his fingers flying over a keyboard. "The plan is survival, my friend. I've rigged your truck with some countermeasures. EMP bursts, signal jammers, even reinforced plating. It's not a spaceship, but it'll keep you alive a little longer." Jake nodded, though the weight of the situation pressed heavily on his chest. "And what about the intel in Callan? How do we get it somewhere safe?" Sam turned to Callan, his expression serious. "That's the tricky part. The data in your biometrics, it's locked tighter than a bank vault. We need a communication relay strong enough to send it to your people without the syndicate intercepting it." Callan frowned. "Relays like that are rare on this planet. Do you have one?" Sam smirked. "Not yet, but I know where to find one. There's an old military satellite uplink about 50 miles from here. It hasn't been used in years, but with a little finesse, we can bring it online." Jake crossed his arms. "And I'm guessing the syndicate will be all over us once we start broadcasting." "Absolutely," Sam said with a shrug. "But if we move fast and keep them off balance, we might just pull it off." Callan's expression hardened. "Then we don't have a choice. We have to try." Jake let out a deep breath, the reality of the plan sinking in. "All right, but if we're doing this, we need to be ready for a fight." Callan stepped closer, her voice firm. "I can teach you how to handle their weapons, their tactics. You've already proven you're capable, Jake. We just need to sharpen those instincts." Jake gave her a lopsided grin. "Didn't know I was signing up for boot camp." Callan's lips curved slightly. "You'll survive. I'll make sure of it." Sam clapped his hands, drawing their attention. "All right, lovebirds, let's focus. I'll finish prepping the truck, and you two can work on your combat strategy. We leave tonight." Callan and Jake exchanged a glance before heading outside. Under the fading sunlight, she demonstrated how to use a syndicate energy weapon she had taken from one of the bounty hunters. "Hold it like this," she said, adjusting Jake's grip. "The recoil is different from your primitive firearms." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Primitive? You're lucky I'm a quick learner." Callan smirked. "I'm counting on it." As they trained, the tension between them softened, replaced by a growing sense of camaraderie. They were two very different people from two very different worlds, but for now, they were united by a single goal: survival. As night fell, the truck stood ready, loaded with their hopes and desperation. The final confrontation was drawing near. The night was darker than usual, the air thick with tension. Jake sat behind the wheel of the truck, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. Callan sat beside him, her golden eyes scanning the road ahead with a sharp intensity. Sam, in the back of the truck, was busy with a series of holographic screens, adjusting the settings on their makeshift EMP generator. "We're almost there," Sam said, glancing up from his screens. "Satellite relay is within range. We just need to get to the site and fire up the uplink." Jake nodded, his jaw clenched. "And then what?" "We send the data and hope they don't catch us." Callan's voice cut through the tension. "It's not that simple. Once the broadcast starts, they'll be able to pinpoint our location. We'll have minutes at best." Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Great. So, we're basically running a gauntlet." Callan didn't flinch. "Yes, but we've planned well. Sam's tech will give us a chance. And I've taught you how to fight." He glanced at her. "Let's hope that's enough." A low rumble echoed in the distance. The sound of engines. Jake's pulse quickened. Here they come. Sam sat up straight, adjusting the controls on the truck's dashboard. I've activated the shield, and the EMP is primed. Just make sure to keep driving, Jake. We can't afford to get caught. Kalen reached over and adjusted the weapon at Jake's side, making sure he was ready. Stay focused. We survive by sticking together. Jake swallowed hard but nodded. He could feel the weight of the mission bearing down on him. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for the future. For Kellen's people. They reached the satellite relay site, a remote, forgotten military compound nestled deep in the forest. The old building was silent, abandoned, but the tall communication tower stood as a looming sentinel against the night sky. Jake parked the truck behind a large concrete wall, the headlights cutting through the darkness. "This is it," Sam said, jumping out of the truck and grabbing the tools from the back. "I'll get the uplink started. You two handle the rest." Before they could react, a flash of light lit up the night. A hovercraft, much like the ones from before, hovered above them, its engines humming loudly. Then more lights. 3 more ships appeared, surrounding the compound. "They're here," Kalen hissed, pulling out her weapon. Jake's heart raced as the first group of Syndicate soldiers landed, armored and armed with high-tech blasters. The air crackled with tension as they advanced toward them. "Stay back," Kalen shouted, stepping in front of Jake. "I'll take care of them. You focus on the uplink." Jake hesitated. "No way. I'm not letting you do this alone." He grabbed his weapon and stood beside her, ready for whatever came next. The first shots rang out. Blasts of energy flew past them, and Kalen darted forward, taking down one soldier with a swift strike. Jake followed her lead, firing at the approaching soldiers, his aim shaky at first, but he quickly found his rhythm. He shot one of the soldiers in the chest, the blast sending the enemy crashing to the ground. Kalen's voice cut through the chaos. "Keep moving." Sam's voice came through their earpieces, frantic. "I've got the uplink online. It's transmitting the data. Now." Jake fired again, taking out another soldier. "How long will it take?" "Not long. Just a few more seconds," Sam replied. But it was clear they were running out of time. The soldiers were closing in. Kalen fought fiercely, but the odds were against them. Jake could feel his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Just a few more seconds. Sam's voice echoed in their earpieces. Then the sound of the transmission finishing rang through Jake's ears. "It's done," Sam shouted. "Get out of there. Now." Kalen nodded at Jake, and together they made a break for the truck. They were almost there when a final blast of energy hit the ground near them, throwing them both to the dirt. Jake's vision blurred, but he forced himself to move, to get up and pull Kalen to her feet. "Come on," he shouted, pulling her toward the truck. They jumped in, Sam already starting the engine. The truck roared to life, and they sped off, leaving the wreckage of the compound behind them. For a moment, the only sound was the heavy breathing of the 3 of them, the reality of their narrow escape settling in. They had survived. For now. But Jake knew this was only the beginning. The Syndicate would come for them again. And next time, they might not be so lucky. The truck raced through the night, the headlights cutting through the trees like twin beams of light in an ocean of darkness. Jake's heart still pounded in his chest, the adrenaline from the fight still coursing through his veins. His hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, but his mind was racing even faster. Kalen sat beside him, her eyes scanning the road ahead, alert and focused. Sam was in the back, working furiously on his screens, ensuring the data was still safe. For a moment, they were all silent, lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Sam spoke, his voice breaking the tension. "We did it. The data is transmitted. It's off-world now. The Syndicate can't touch it." Jake exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Good. That's one victory at least." Kalen leaned back in her seat, her body relaxing slightly. But her face remained tense, her golden eyes filled with a storm of emotions. "This isn't over, Jake. The syndicate will come for us. They'll send more troops. And next time, we might not be so lucky." Jake glanced at her. "I know, but we got a head start now. We've got the data they want, and they don't know where we are yet." "Not for long," Kellen muttered. "They'll find us. They always do." Jake's gaze returned to the road ahead. He could feel the weight of her words, the cold reality setting in. They'd won this battle, but the war wasn't over. The syndicate would stop at nothing to get the information back, and they'd keep coming until they succeeded. Sam tapped on the side window, catching Jake's attention. "I've been looking through the satellite data. We're clear for now, but the syndicate has eyes everywhere. We need to get off the grid completely. Hide in plain sight, if possible." Jake nodded. "Any suggestions?" Sam shrugged. "There's a place, a quiet town on the other side of the mountain. It's remote, a little off the map. No one's going to look for you there." "Let's go," Kalen said sharply. "We don't have much time." Jake nodded and floored the accelerator. The truck roared to life again, speeding down the winding road, taking them farther from danger, but never truly escaping it. As they drove, Kalen spoke again, her voice quieter now. "Jake, I don't know how to thank you. You've risked everything for me, for a cause that's not your own." Jake glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You'd do the same for me, wouldn't you?" Kalen met his gaze, her golden eyes softening. "I would." The words hung in the air, charged with something more than just gratitude. Jake knew they were bound together now, not just by the mission, but by the experiences they'd shared, the battles they'd fought side by side. But as they reached the edge of the forest, a distant glow appeared in the sky, a flash of red light. Jake's heart sank. "They found us," Kalen whispered. "Sam, how much longer to that town?" Jake demanded. Sam checked his screen quickly. 5 minutes, maybe less. But we'll have to make a sharp turn to avoid the main road. It's our only chance." Jake nodded, pushing the truck harder, the engine screaming in protest as they sped toward the mountain pass. The chase was on again. But this time, they had a secret weapon, the data. And Jake wasn't going to let it go without a fight. The truck raced through the night, the headlights cutting through the trees like twin beams of light in an ocean of darkness. Jake's heart still pounded in his chest, the adrenaline from the fight still coursing through his veins. His hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, but his mind was racing even faster. Kalen sat beside him, her eyes scanning the road ahead, alert and focused. Sam was in the back, working furiously on his screens, ensuring the data was still safe. For a moment, they were all silent, lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Sam spoke, his voice breaking the tension. "We did it. The data is transmitted. It's off-world now. The syndicate can't touch it." Jake exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Good. That's one victory at least." Kalen leaned back in her seat, her body relaxing slightly. But her face remained tense, her golden eyes filled with a storm of emotions. "This isn't over, Jake. The syndicate will come for us. They'll send more troops. And next time, we might not be so lucky." Jake glanced at her. "I know, but we got a head start now. We've got the data they want, and they don't know where we are yet." "Not for long," Kellen muttered. "They'll find us. They always do." Jake's gaze returned to the road ahead. He could feel the weight of her words, the cold reality setting in. They'd won this battle, but the war wasn't over. The syndicate would stop at nothing to get the information back, and they'd keep coming until they succeeded. Sam tapped on the side window, catching Jake's attention. "I've been looking through the satellite data. We're clear for now, but the syndicate has eyes everywhere. We need to get off the grid completely. Hide in plain sight, if possible." Jake nodded. "Any suggestions?" Sam shrugged. "There's a place, a quiet town on the other side of the mountain. It's remote, a little off the map. No one's going to look for you there. Let's go, Kalen said sharply. We don't have much time. Jake nodded and floored the accelerator. The truck roared to life again, speeding down the winding road, taking them farther from danger, but never truly escaping it. As they drove, Kalen spoke again, her voice quieter now. Jake, I don't know how to thank you. You've risked everything for me, for a cause that's not your own. Jake glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. You'd do the same for me, wouldn't you? Kalen met his gaze, her golden eyes softening. I would. The words hung in the air, charged with something more than just gratitude. Jake knew they were bound together now, not just by the mission, but by the experiences they'd shared, the battles they'd fought side by side. But as they reached the edge of the forest, a distant glow appeared in the sky, a flash of red light. Jake's heart sank. They found us, Kalen whispered. Sam, how much longer to that town? Jake demanded. Sam checked his screen quickly. 5 minutes, maybe less. But we'll have to make a sharp turn to avoid the main road. It's our only chance. Jake nodded, pushing the truck harder, the engine screaming in protest as they sped toward the mountain pass. The chase was on again. But this time, they had a secret weapon, the data. And Jake wasn't going to let it go without a fight.